Chapter 9. The Invitation. Before they knew it, the engagement ball was upon them. Gaston had been dreading the ball since Mrs. Potts had told him about it. He didn't want to see Kingsley for the first time in so many years on the same night he was going to meet Kingsley's fiancée, Circe. Gaston had hoped he would have some time with him alone. A mere handful of hours would have sufficed. But it seemed the prince and his betrothed would be arriving at the castle together in a whirlwind of excessive fanfare and pomposity. Gaston had thought he would sneak off to his estate and just avoid the spectacle altogether. But Mrs. Potts advised him otherwise, so he decided to stay in his father's old cottage that night to be nearer the castle. He tried to avoid staying there as much as possible. It reminded him too much of his father, and somehow their cat seemed to know where he was, always showing up for her scrunches and bowl of milk. She was usually out on adventures, that cat, gone for weeks at a time, but she always found her way home, whether she was staying at the cottage or in his house on his estate, and he was happy for her company. None of the plans for Kingsley's return seemed like something his friend would have planned himself. Gaston heard Kingsley and Circe would be riding in an open carriage throughout the many kingdoms, making their way through all the neighboring kingdoms as well as the village in his own kingdom, so he might show off his new intendant as he made his way to the castle. And if that wasn't lofty enough, once he made his grand appearance, he was to be greeted by a multitude of kings and queens, lords and ladies, and gentry from the surrounding kingdoms, all there to celebrate his engagement to Circe. No one spoke of anything else. It was sickening, really. At least Gaston thought so. It was nothing like the Kingsley he knew. From the sound of it, this would be the most lavish event in the history of the many kingdoms, and that was saying something if the book of fairy tales was to be believed. It was a far cry from eating smashed sandwiches in the hollow of an old tree while waiting to see if they could spy fairies. But then Gaston, suppose they weren't boys anymore, and the queen seemed pleased to have a reason to throw a party. She had even arranged for some of the spectacles she had originally planned for the thwarted celebration that was to have taken place many years ago. Now, before the beast's return and Gaston's father died, something about it made Gaston's stomach lurch. He remembered the day he and his father went to check on the queen's pavilion to make sure it would be ready for her ill-fated grand event. He suddenly felt angry with the queen for dragging him back into those dark memories. Mrs. Potts had just warned him about not letting himself drown in the past, and that's exactly what he was doing. But it wasn't the queen's fault. She wasn't pulling him under. He was letting the weight of his grief drag him down. So Gaston cleared his mind, trying to make himself ready to see Kingsley and Circe, even though he was dreading it with all of his being. Gaston was invited to the engagement ball that evening as a guest, not as a servant. He was surprised by a knock on the cottage door and opened it to find a royal servant, all spiffed up in a white powdered wig, flouncy coat, short pants, stockings, and silk shoes with flashy buckles, standing on the porch. The servant had even brought the invitation on a little silver tray, which made Gaston laugh. It wasn't as if someone couldn't have given it to him when he was in the servants' hall. Why all this pomp and circumstance? The servant gesticulated dramatically as he announced the contents of the invitation, as if he were delivering the most important speech ever uttered in the history of the many kingdoms. You are hereby invited by the king and queen to attend a royal ball to celebrate the engagement of the prince and his beloved, said the footman, standing awkwardly as he held the little round silver tray with the invitation sitting upon it. Francis, is that you under that wig? What have you come as? Gaston laughed even harder, realizing the awkward servant was Francis. "Shut up, I'm trying to be official," said Francis, sweating under all his finery, and clearly embarrassed. Gaston recognized him. "I'm sorry, but is all this nonsense really necessary?" Gaston took the invitation from the tray. When he opened it, he saw there was a small piece of paper folded up, with a note scrawled on it along with the official invitation. "It is nonsense and all. Completely unnecessary. Having me run around in silk shoes like some sort of toff. Whoever heard of a footman wearing silk shoes? I'm afraid I'm going to get mud on them or something." Gaston could see Francis hadn't meant to let out that little outburst, and his demeanor quickly snapped back into that of formality rather than familiarity. He cleared his throat, apologized, and continued. "The prince wants you to know he has made arrangements for you to have rooms in the castle, and there you will find your clothing for the ball this evening," said Francis, eyeing Gaston. "I see." Gaston looked at the note. He wondered if someone had told Francis he wasn't able to read, and suddenly he felt ashamed, and like some kind of imposter. He wondered why he was being invited to this fancy ball, and he was sure everyone else there would be asking themselves the same thing. "Simply ask Mr. Cogsworth to direct you to your room. The gong is at 6. An intimate party will be meeting in the drawing room at 7, to be followed by a light dinner at 8, after which the ball will be officially opened by the prince and his betrothed. Now, if you will excuse me, I have my other duties to attend to," Francis said before he quickly walked away. Gaston felt bad for making a joke about his outfit. He didn't mean to. Not really, so he called after Francis. "Oi, Francis, I'm sorry." Gaston couldn't be sure if he heard. "This is madness," Gaston said to his cat, who was looking up at him with sleepy eyes after being awoken from her slumber by his booming voice. "This is not like Kingsley at all." "This is not like Kingsley, not at all," he said to the cat. She just blinked at him before snuggling back into her cushion near the fireplace. "Well, you're no help. I guess I'd better go see Mrs. Potts to see what this is all about," he said, grabbing his knapsack and weapons and heading out the door. He made his way through the forest and to the castle, going around back to the servants' entrance, and found Mrs. Potts in her sitting room going over her list. "Look at this!" He stood in her doorway, waving the note and invitation in a flurry. "Francis says I am to have rooms in the castle. Did you know about this? What does Mr. Cogsworth have to say?" "It's not for Mr. Cogsworth to have an opinion about any of it," Mrs. Potts said without looking up. "It was a royal order." Mrs. Potts was checking her list and ticking off the tasks that had been completed. "I don't understand why you are so upset. I would think you'd be happy to see your friend." "I am. Of course I am. I think I am. But what's this about an intimate dinner before the ball? What does that even mean?" asked Gaston, trying to bring her attention back around to him. "It's just a light dinner for the family. There will be an at-home for the duration. There will be an at-home for the duration of the ball, in which food will be served, and of course a late supper and breakfast in the morning," said Mrs. Potts. "Don't worry, there will be plenty for you to eat." "So it's an all-night event?" Gaston was surprised. The king and queen had not thrown a party of this magnitude since the one they'd been preparing for when his father died. "I heard the queen is going to light the pavilion, and yesterday I saw the gardeners making animal topiaries in the hedge maze, and now they've got poor Francis running around, sweating in his fancy livery and powdered wig, handing out invitations on a silver tray. She's given everyone a lot of work with very little time to do it." Gaston shook his head. "I can't imagine Kingsley wanted any of this. The queen didn't order all this. It was decreed by the prince. He seemed to have, how shall I say it, come into his position while he's been away." Gaston knew that half smile. The one that said Mrs. Potts did not approve. I see, said Gaston, feeling even more nervous about seeing his friend again than he had already been. He had to wonder if this was all Circe's influence. She was from a very old royal family and was probably demanding all this cockamamie fanfare. He hated the idea of some snobbishly annoying pretty little princess changing everything and making their court boring and pompous, just like Kingsley had promised he would never be. And what was she going to think of him, the prince's servant friend, his childhood companion, who didn't know how to read and whom he felt sorry for? Maybe that's why the prince was picking out clothes for him, making him look presentable, respectful, so he would fit in, as if he was just an old friend and not the son of a servant. Gaston was starting to get angry. Since when did his friend care what anyone thought, or make poor footmen run around in powdered wigs? This was beyond intolerable, and he wasn't going to stand for it. He wasn't going to get dressed up in some silly outfit and try to win anyone's approval. And I suppose I'm to wear some snooty outfit that he's picked out. I'll probably look like a fool. Gaston felt as if his stomach was full of fluttering bats. I suppose the only way to find out is to go upstairs and try it on, and let me get back to my work. Mrs. Potts was still glued to her lists. Gaston sighed, feeling defeated, and turned to walk away. He stopped when he heard Mrs. Potts' voice calling to him. I'm sorry, dear. There's just so much to do, and with Mr. Potts away on top of everything else, you know how I worry when he's traveling, she said. Gaston understood. He loved this woman and would forgive her anything. She was the closest thing to a mother he had. I didn't know Mr. Potts was away. Is everything okay? He said, remembering her husband wasn't at dinner the previous night. Gaston hadn't even bothered to ask after him. He had been so consumed by his own problems, he didn't stop to think Mr. and Mrs. Potts were having troubles of their own. His brother isn't well, you see, and there is no one else to care for him now that his wife has passed away. I fear Mr. Potts won't be back for some time. She was trying not to look worried. Gaston felt bad he hadn't been visiting Mrs. Potts as often as she would like, and made a promise he would come to dinner and visit with her more often, especially with Mr. Potts away. I'm sorry to hear that. Please send Mr. Potts my best next time you write him. There he was prattling on when she had so many other things on her mind. And don't worry, Mrs. Potts. I'm here. I know you are, dear. Thank you. And Gaston, the very last thing you will look like at the ball this evening is a fool. I guarantee you will be the most handsome man there, she said. Now bend over so I could give you a kiss, she said with her sweet giggle. You mean I will be the second most handsome man there, Gaston said. I remember my father telling me I should never let Kingsley know I am better than him at anything. Shooting, hunting, riding, everything. He said that's what he did with the king. He always let him think he was the best. That sounds like your papa. But Gaston, that's not the relationship you have with the prince. Was he ever cross with you when you were better at something? Never. I tried telling my father that every time he warned me, but he said one day it would change. I wonder if he was right. All this pomposity and fancy frilly stuff is in Kingsley. Do you think he's changed? Does it seem like it from his letters? Perhaps, but I doubt he's changed toward you. And between us, dear, I think you truly are even more handsome than the prince, and there isn't a thing you could do to change that. She smiled and patted his hand. Now, I really must get back to work. I think you will find Mr. Cogsworth is in his pantry. He's been expecting you. Even though Gaston was no longer a child, he couldn't help but feel like one in the presence of Mr. Cogsworth. Things had been easier with him in recent years. He wasn't sure why things had changed, if it was because the prince told him to leave Gaston alone, or if Mr. Cogsworth had finally come around to accepting Gaston's unconventional place in the household. He wanted Gaston to like him, Growing up, he had been like a father to the prince, and in a way, that's how Gaston looked at him now, though there was no reason in it, except that he no longer had a father, and he had known Cogsworth since he was a boy. He knocked on the butler's pantry door and heard Mr. Cogsworth's voice from the other side. "Come in." "Good afternoon, Mr. Cogsworth. I was told to come to you, that you would tell me where to find my rooms." Mr. Cogsworth was sitting at his desk, decanting a bottle of wine. He looked like an alchemist, with the wine bottle in a strange contraption and his candlestick nearby to give him more light. "Yes, sir," said Mr. Cogsworth, standing up. "You should have come to the front door." "You are a guest in this house, and will be treated as such," said Mr. Cogsworth, rather stiffly, and not at all in the friendly, more familiar way Gaston had grown accustomed to in recent years. "I mean, I could go back out and enter through the front if you'd like," said Gaston, laughing to make things light. But Mr. Cogsworth didn't laugh. He stood there stoic as ever. Gaston felt as if he had been transported to another world. Was this how Mr. Cogsworth was with the family and their guests? It seemed so odd and formal, and it made Gaston uncomfortable. "It's funny, isn't it, Mr. Cogsworth? For years you were always scolding me for going through the front door, and now you're saying that I shouldn't have used the servants' entrance." Gaston was being jovial, but old Cogsworth was like a pillar of stone standing there at attention. Gaston didn't understand what was going on. "Indeed, things change, sir, and while you are a guest in this house, please just call me Cogsworth." "Oh, stop with all these formalities, Mr. Cogsworth. We're old friends, you and I. There's no reason for pretense," said Gaston earnestly. Was Mr. Cogsworth angry that Kingsley had given the order to treat Gaston like a guest? Did old Cogsworth not approve? Whatever was going on, Gaston didn't like it. "There is even reason for these formalities, sir. You are a guest for the prince, and therefore the family, and you deserve the same respect as anyone who is a guest in this house. I wouldn't want to overstep the mark." This reminded Gaston of the conversation he had overheard between Mr. Cogsworth and the prince. The day the prince told Gaston he was going away on tour, Mr. Cogsworth had suggested Gaston should learn his place, and the prince got angry with him and said he was overstepping the mark. Was the prince still taking this line with poor Cogsworth? And again, Gaston was sorry he never learned to read or write. If he had, he would have mentioned to Kingsley how things had been between him and Cogsworth in recent years. He hated the idea of Kingsley still being cruel to the old fellow. "I'm not sure what Kingsley said to you, Mr. Cogsworth, but I have been very happy with how things have been between us lately. Let's not ruin it now," said Gaston, wishing he knew what the prince had said. "As you say, sir. Young Francis will show you to your room, and will be taking care of you this evening," he said in this stiff manner. "Taking care of me? What do you mean?" Gaston couldn't hide the incredulous look on his face. He was dumbfounded. As the first footman, he serves as valet when we have guests who don't bring servants of their own. He looked Gaston up and down. "Of course I don't have servants. What's going on? I just saw Francis. He didn't mention any of this. I don't need a valet, Mr. Cogsworth," he said, shaking his head. "Nevertheless, Francis will be there to assist you." Mr. Cogsworth opened his door and called Francis to come to his pantry. Francis arrived, no longer wearing his previous outfit, now having donned a sober black uniform befitting a valet. "Francis, could you please show Gaston to his room?" asked Cogsworth. This was all too much for Gaston, and he didn't understand why Cogsworth was making such a fuss. Kingsley must have said something to him. It was strange having people he knew, people he was friendly with, and even grew up with, wait on him. He could hardly think of what to say, or where to look as he and Francis walked to his room together. So he tried to break the tension. "Just how many costume changes are you expected to make in the course of one day, Francis?" Gaston asked with a chuckle. but Francis didn't even crack a smile. "This way, sir," said Francis, opening the door to the room assigned to Gaston. "Oh, come on, Francis, not you too." Gaston was losing his patience. He knew Francis was just doing his job, but he felt like he had been transported into another universe, or was part of some elaborate prank everyone was in on except for him. And when Francis led him into his room, he was shocked. It was a large set of rooms with wood furnishings and wood-paneled walls decorated with mounted elk, deer, and wolf heads. There was a massive stone fireplace with 2 comfortable chairs sitting across from the crackling fire, which was flanked by 2 enormous elk statues, and on the mantel were several crystal decanters with matching glasses in which to enjoy the various spirits. The rooms were at the back of the house and had a set of glass pan doors that led to a balcony with a breathtaking view of the night sky and below of the vast woods. The balcony connected to the adjoining bedroom, which had a massive 4-poster bed carved from wood. The posts were incredibly crafted to look like acorns, leaves, and small forest creatures like squirrels, rabbits, and foxes. The headboard featured a wolf sleeping under a night sky with a full moon. The bed was surrounded by heavy velvet drapes that matched the drapes on the windows, and red tapestries hung on the stone walls. On the other side of the bedroom was a dressing table and a wardrobe where clothing hung waiting for him to put it on for the evening festivities. This room was not the Queen's style. It almost felt as if it had been decorated especially for Gaston, though the thought was ludicrous, even if he didn't remember ever seeing a room such as this in all the years he'd spent there. He couldn't believe he would be given such large rooms, with so many royal guests coming to visit. A sitting room and a bedroom. How fancy! "Are you sure it's for me?" he said to Francis, who was standing at attention, awaiting Gaston's orders. "In a room with a bath," said Francis, motioning to a door hanging ajar Gaston hadn't noticed. "I have had one drawn for you. I will be back later to help you dress." "This isn't necessary, Francis. I don't know what the prince is playing at, but I am sure you have better things to do than help a grown man get dressed," said Gaston. "But it's my job, sir," said Francis, and suddenly Gaston felt ashamed. He hadn't intended to belittle the man's position. "Of course it is. I'm sorry. Thank you, Francis." He watched Francis leave the room with a bit of relief, sighed, and plopped down on the bed. He didn't know what was going on, but he decided whatever it was, he'd soon find out. And the last thing he was going to do was make a fool of himself. If Kingsley wanted him to dress and act like a gentleman, then that was what he was going to do. Gaston had no idea if his fears about this Circe were based in reality, but he decided he wasn't going to give her a reason not to like him. He would be on his best behavior.